All right, you all. Welcome and good evening. My name is Monique Young. I go by the student support coach. And tonight's live, we are talking about three signs that discipline is about to stress you out this school year. More specifically, before we even get to October. So, if you don't know me, I have a background as a school counselor. I've done that for the last 10 years. I've also worked as a student services coordinator at the district level, supervising deans, behavior interventionists, counselors, school based therapists. And now I work as a school mental health consultant, and I help transform discipline referrals into positive social emotional development. And so I felt like this was a perfect time to bring up this topic of, discipline and it potentially stressing people out, right? Early on in the school year. Now, specifically, as I'm talking like to administrators and school leaders, there's typically some signs that you will be stressed out based on like how you have things structured or how you have things organized, or I guess the lack thereof. But it's really important because I feel like, especially say if you're working as an assistant principal, you have to deal with a lot of the behavior, right? So referrals, investigations, parent phone calls, assigning consequences, walkie calls, right? And it can feel never ending. And that could put like lots of stress on your immune system and your health. I'm pretty sure as far as school leaders, y'all's health bills is like out out the wazoo, okay? So, like I said, we want to make sure that you feel aligned to what you're doing. And the way that we kind of set up things here for the school year can be the change, the positive change for that. Okay. So, again, I'm going to talk about these three signs that discipline may just be about to stress you out. And so I'm going to get into the first one, but I will say I do have some questions for you to answer in the chat as we go along, but feel free to like give me some feedback so I know that you're watching. If anything resonates with you, give me some emojis, something like that, so I know that you're there and that you're listening in, okay? Even if you're watching the replay as well too. So one of the first signs that you're going to be stressed out is that you don't have a consistent system and routine for keeping up with behavior. Now, I could characterize those as teachers are calling any and everybody for help. Okay, so they're texting, they are calling the office phone, they all in the group chat, they sending a carrier dove at some point. They are calling any and everybody, and there's no clarity on who do we call or who do I contact if my student needs additional support. Now, another way to characterize that is that you have parents that are coming up to the school all times of the day and demanding meetings with you about their child's behavior or something that happened with their child. Um, I love the parents, but again, that does not help when it comes to having a schedule, right? Or keeping up with, hey, I got other things to do, or I had things planned for the day, and now you got this sporadic pop up meeting. Another way to characterize that is your response to behavior is just as sporadic as your receival of said behavior. So if you're letting these things lead your day, again, I can tell that things are going to be a little chaotic for you. What that needs to transform into is that when you have a student that needs assistance or additional support outside of the classroom, what is the process from the time that they're in the classroom to them receiving some outside support? There needs to be some clarity about who's responding, when are they responding, what does that support look like, and how does it look like when they get back to the classroom. Now, I do a training where I talk about, well, I call it ring the alarm, student crisis response, but I'm helping student support teams and I'm helping them figure out what does that response look like, because what it looks like in a lot of schools now typically is, oh, well, the student isn't complying to what the teacher needs. That student goes to ISS, or that student might go to some type of lunch detention, a buddy room, a safe seat, and it's not really giving a full response at times, especially too if There's multiple people who are responding and they don't even know who's supposed to respond. Because then everybody's looking at the walkie like, you gonna get it? You gonna get it? You gonna get it? I've been in those situations before. Now, another way that we need to transform, right? Some of that feeling of your response is very sporadic is knowing when and where your hot spots occur. So this has to do with you reviewing the data, right? So let's say that you review your data and you see, like most schools, that especially most elementary schools, that a lot of your behavior incidents are coming from students or classrooms returning from recess. So from that time that they leave the recess area to coming back into the school building, oh, we've got lots of discipline referrals, right? Instead of just saying, well, I'm going to be available to be there during that time, because I feel like that's a lot of people's first mind, is thinking more deeply about, okay, now I need to investigate. I need to put on my Inspector Gadget hat and think about why are the behaviors happening. I talked about this in the last live where I was saying that, speaking to students, pulling out some of those students that are specifically engaged in a lot of those discipline referrals, or you see them mentioned quite a bit in the referrals, talking to them and figuring out why, because there could be a lot of different reasons why those type of behaviors are happening. It could be that the students aren't spending a lot of time outside, so now they disgruntled with the teacher and arguing with the teacher in the hallway on their way back in from recess. Could be that they're spending too much time outside and now we can't reel it back in because we've had so much time out there and we all tired and exhausted, and now we acting like we can't follow rules. Or it might be that we're having a lot of conflicts out there at recess, which I've definitely experienced that, where we fighting over basketball or the rules of football, and now we coming in having arguments because we don't know how to get through conflict. So again, it's really going to be different from school to school to school. So you have to be able to investigate and figure out why it's happening so that you could have some type of way to intervene with that. So, a question that I have for you is, among you and your supporting staff, is there a clear process for responding to students in behavior crisis? Again, among you and your supporting staff, is there a clear process for responding to students in behavior crisis? Because if you got people calling your office phone, sending it in the staff chat, trying to send students down to come get you, then it's not clear. That those are signs that it ain't clear at all, and they just putting up smoke signals at this point. Okay. Now, another thing to think about, or I want you to think through, is based on off of your information from last year. Can you predict your hotspots? And how do you plan to intervene? So, like I said, a lot of schools, it's the cafeteria. We got drama that's going on, people saying this and saying that, he said, she said, now it turned into we want to fight. If that's what's happening for your school and you know that, but lunch obviously still has to happen, how do you plan to set up lunch differently so that we are getting in front of this challenge? We know that it's going to be a challenge if we do the same process that we did last year. But what can we change so that it's not that same deal? Okay. So, like I said, I'm going to be curious to see what y'all, how y'all respond to that. Have you thought about that from last year? And I know for a lot of people, as far as this turnaround from last year to this year, it feel like it's been only like 3 weeks, maybe a month. And I know that going from summer school to jumping right into a new school year can happen real quick. But I'm telling you, these are definitely the times where you should be looking at that data from last year and seeing, okay, where were we having most of the discipline referrals, and what time? Time matters too. Because I will tell you, I wrote a post about it yesterday where I was saying like 2 o'clock. My assistant principal, she would have so many of her discipline referrals come in right at 2 o'clock, because not only did the students just have lunch or they finished up lunch, but a lot of the students or classrooms had finished up recess at that time too. So that was an opportunity for us to say, what do we need to change so that we're seeing less discipline referrals at the end of the day? All right. So let's get into the second sign, right? Second sign that you are just about to be stressed out this school year is if you are trying to execute everything alone. And believe it or not, I feel like more schools are doing this than not, especially if, like I said, relating back to that last live that I did, if you have one role whose responsibility is to take care of all of the behavior. So, again, if you're a school leader, that might be that you're avoiding giving behavior response tasks to other staff because you don't want to overwhelm them, or you might be scared that, oh, well, if I give them too much, they might resign mid year. But here's my thing, some behavior tasks actually fall into that person's role. And I'll give you an example. If you have school counselors, they can actually do small groups for kids that are fighting at recess. However, it's not going to be that same day that the fight occurs. It's probably not going to be that same week that the fight occurs. It's not the best use of your school counseling services to ask them to do provide counseling for like one-off situations. Now, here's what you can do though. You can look at your data that you have. You can highlight the pattern or the trends that you're seeing in the data. You can suggest specific students that keep coming up, right? And ask your school counselor to take on the task of creating a small group that includes some of those students. Now, I will say that if the majority of the grade is Nook if you buck out there at the playground, then that needs to be something that's addressed at the grade level. How you get it is how you return it. So you can't say, oh, well, we had 60 kids fighting at recess, so we're going to split up and do like 6 small counseling groups, 10 kids a group, and expect for your counselor to do that. That doesn't even, it's not even the best use of your counselor's time. Like, we got to go with tier one first, right? But what's quick and can be done on the same day? Social stories. If you haven't used social stories before, the actual origin was for students who have autism. However, I will tell you that a lot of the tools and the strategies to help students with autism are typically nice tools and strategies for students who have continuous behavior challenges. When you start to look at and find the resources, they be overlapping a lot. Okay. But a social story, typically what it does is it talks about a particular incident or a particular thing that's happening. So the first one that pops up into my head is like getting ready for the day. And it helps the person think through, okay, what are the actions that I'm supposed to be doing? You can even talk through what should I have done instead, or like what is a healthier response to what actually happened? What are some alternatives to what could be done? What did I do last time, and what can I do if this is to happen again? So a lot of actually like the SEL like picture books that are used like during ELA that has a moral to the story are really good resources as far as a quick reference to, hey, when this situation occurs, maybe like sharing, or when somebody talks about you crazy, how is a way that you can respond to it? What is the most healthy choice? What's the most realistic choice for you in those type of situations? So if you want to shift how your supporting staff provide behavior support, you need to, one, be upfront. But then the second thing is to have them align how that behavior response relates to their role. If it's something that you're directing or you're mandating, they're going to reject it. So you have to have the conversation with them so that they're able to align how that behavior support aligns to your role. I'm gonna give you another example. Now, I'm gonna tell you as a school counselor example because that's where my brain goes first. But well, first of all, when we talk about that conversation though, You need to be specific or know the boundaries of how their role aligns to behavior response so that you can push where needed. So, my example is uh, more than likely, you're going to have a school counselor that doesn't do anything with behavior because they feel like it's discipline. According to the American School Counseling Association, school counselors do not do discipline. That is correct. However, not all behavior is discipline. Okay. And so I've talked about it in my last live where I said typically behavior that we see, there's a social emotional need behind it. School counselors do deal with social emotional skills. And so a way that you could push back in that conversation is asking your counselor, well, because specifically maybe in this situation you want your counselors to do more mediations because y'all are having lots of peer conflict at your school. The way that you can push back is asking your school counselor, well, don't school counselors give students the skills to work through conflict? How are these different? Okay, so you're taking heed to what their functionality is, right? You know that they work with social emotional skills, but relating it to, hey, actually, working through conflict is a type of social emotional skills. Like, how can we utilize your skill set in order to help our students do more of this? Okay, so that's just one example. But what I've come to learn is that there are so many other supporting roles, whether it's your school social workers, it's your deans, your behavior interventionists, even your community partners that can help decrease the behavior that you're seeing, but you have to specifically know as a school leader, again, what are the boundaries of what they do? What is the function of what they do so that you can ask specifically for support with behavior? If that's something that you feel like is a need at your school, I actually do have a mini series that I created on YouTube. I've broken it down into school mental health professionals, behavior support roles, and community resources. Yeah, community resources, so that I'm highlighting 13 different roles that can help with behavior support. But I'm telling you in particular how you can utilize each one to decrease your behavior. Because again, it's got to be more than a one person type deal in order for us to really be able to get in front of the mass amount of behaviors that likely you're going to see, right? Now, I will say that it is my personal belief that things like crisis response, mediations, consultation, that those should be shared responses. Um, just like the fair share duties, right? I just feel like everybody, even like your teachers, like there should be some portion of that where everybody's sharing that responsibility. Because think about it, if you are at a school and y'all have 500 kids, right? Of those 500 kids, you're noticing that there are 35 kids who are contiguously in your discipline referral. So they're continuously getting those suspensions or write ups, right? Now, if you have one person, say it's the assistant principal in this example, but the assistant principal is the one who is doing all of the response for the students. So any investigations, parent phone calls, you name it, right? That's one person trying to respond to potentially 35 students at a time. Now, let's say we start adding in some of the support roles. Well, you have, like I said, you have counselors, you might have a behavior interventionist, you might have, just school psych. But if you start adding in some of those people, right? That could be anywhere from 5 to 7 to 8 people that are splitting potentially 35 students that need that support. So that means that, oh, as a school counselor, if I'm at your school and there's 35 kids who are continuously having challenges, I might only need to intervene with 4 or 5 kids that day outside of whatever my other scheduled responsibilities were for that day versus again me trying to deal with 35 on my own. So it's a numbers game until we get things under control. It's all hands on deck. Okay, so my question for you is, what's either a behavior response task you can spread out more amongst supporting roles, or a behavior response task you could give more pushback on. So again, my question is, what's either a behavior response task you could spread out more amongst supporting roles, or a behavior response task you could give more pushback on? Because the goal isn't to necessarily give people more work. It's how can we spread the work that is already here? We can't necessarily control the behaviors and how they happen every single day, but again, how can we spread some of this responsibility? Okay, but it actually kind of goes into my next sign that you might be stressed out this school year, which is an admin that's leaning into suspensions and alternate settings. So yes, my buddy rooms, my safe seats, my ISS, my out of school suspensions. But you're leaning into the suspensions and alternate settings and hoping for behavior change. Now I'm gonna tell you a little secret, but I feel like you know the secret already. Most kids that are in school suspension a lot, they like in school suspension. And I'm gonna tell you why, because they tell me this, right? It's a smaller setting. They develop a relationship with the person who is typically supervising it, and it's typically quiet. You'd be surprised to know that the kids are even causing the havoc or causing the loudness in the classroom. They don't like all that loudness, and they actually prefer a quiet environment. So we know that typically like, suspensions are a temporary band aid, but it does not yield results in changed behavior for most students. The people that it actually does work for is typically like the smaller 5% who maybe got into a one off situation or in trouble. And those are typically also the students that if you say you're going to call their mama, they start crying. So it's not for the kids who are continuously having those behavior challenges. It does really nothing for them. They start to like it because, again, they get to get away from all these other people and they're building a stronger relationship with that person who's typically supervising the room. Even if you say like, oh well, we make it so kids ain't gonna want to come to ISS, we make them face the wall and they can't talk in here and this that, them kids still rather be in ISS than in the classroom 9 times out of 10. I'm gonna just put that out there. Okay. So and also something that I've started to learn, right, in the years working, especially closely with school leaders, that administrators love leveled infractions. Baby, y'all love a level 1, a level 2, a level 3. But imagine the kids that experience repeated behaviors. They're typically at a higher end of the behavior infraction list by the end of a full month of school. So yeah, in August, we're still in that honeymoon phase, but I'm telling you, by mid September, we've had a month going. Like I said, the chronic disrespect, the chronic defiance, they keep leveling up, right? Like Sierra, level up, level up, level up. They're leveling up, and like I said, they're already at a level 3 infraction now, and it's mid September. So what does that look like as far as the trajectory around January and February? We already hitting the end of the leveled infraction list. That does nothing for them. It does not change the behavior. Okay. Now, what I will say, what that needs to transform to, or what's helpful for you to transform that to, is two things: seeking out the student's social emotional needs, right? Because behind the behavior, there's some type of social emotional need, and then having skill development be a part of your response. Okay. Now that might seem like, well, dang, Monique, like now you giving me more work. You saying that I got all these behaviors and now I got to figure out their needs and I got to build their skills. It is going to seem like more work on the front end. I ain't going to lie to you, because behavior work is it takes effort, but the reward on the end is going to be better than you just dealing with behaviors. Because what tends to happen now is, okay, well, like I said, the student gets into um, they need some type of consequence, and so you give them a suspension and you kind of just throw them in a room with other kids. And again, that's putting a band-aid on it. We're not necessarily changing the behavior long term. So I'll give you an example. If I do the dishes throughout the day, typically that means I got less dishes to do at the end of the day. Let me give you a different example that's more aligned with you, right? If I check emails throughout the day, I should not have a massive emails waiting for me at the end of the day. Now, I know some of y'all like, I still got a lot of emails. Now, look, I'm pretty sure we've all had a moment, either you was out sick, maybe you had a doctor's appointment, right? And you couldn't get to your emails until the end of the day or maybe that next day. So say you come back and instead of you just having so an email here, email there, a couple hundred here, a couple of there, you get to the end of the day and you got 1,200 emails. Like, there's going to be way more of a reward if you are putting that effort in at the beginning of the school year. Like I said, having those weekly meetings that we talked about with your support team, looking at that data, identifying where are the hot spots, right? And how can we intervene? But also for the students that you're seeing recurring, right? They're always having a discipline referral about X, Y, and Z. How can we support them? Because typically there is some social emotional need behind it. And if we're not meeting it, it's going to keep occurring. So here's some examples. Typically, if your students are dealing with fighting, then they could work on conflict resolution. If students are walking out of the classroom or leaving the classroom a lot, self management is a skill that they could be working on. If they get into peer conflict a lot, healthy relationship skills. They're destroying the classrooms, right? Emotional regulation. And that doesn't mean that every single student gets assigned something whenever there's continuous behaviors, but you can start to see that, okay, maybe this child does need additional support. It's the same thing as thinking of like you have students academically, right, who may struggle with reading or writing, and then you put them in a tier two group in the classroom. Well, who are those students that need the tier two help when it comes to social emotional skills? There's going to be some, and that's when you call in your school counselor to do a group or your social worker to do a group. It's not just, again, the kid is out there fighting at recess, and now you say, I need you to do a small group tomorrow. No, we want to save that for tier two, for the students who are continuously getting into the fights, right? But having time so they can plan that out, so they can talk to the parents, they can get, everything they need to get right or set up so that they can formally or I can't think of the word, but they can do the group in the right way and not just a rushed way. Okay. So my question for you is, what is your plan for developing the behaviors you want to see? And like I said, you can even look back to your data from last year, especially for the students that you know are returning, that you know have had multiple discipline infractions last school year. What is your plan for developing the behavior you want to see? And more specifically for those individual students, what are their social emotional needs? Why does this behavior keep happening with these students? There is a reason, whether the student knows it or not, but there is a reason. And again, putting that Inspector Gadget hat on to figure out why. But that plan for developing positive behaviors, that should be clear across all your tiers 1, tier 2, and tier 3, because there should be some responsibility within your teachers, within you as admin, within your students, your families, your community partners, your support staff. Like, everybody should have some part to play when it comes to developing positive behaviors for students. Okay, so we just talked about 3 signs that this one is about to stress you out, right? We talked about one, You don't have no system, right? That means that you need to build some structure for behavior response. It needs to be clearer. And like I said, reflecting on how it looked last year, did it seem frantic? Because if it was frantic, that means you about to be frantic. Just saying, it's give and take, right? Also, if you're executing behavior support alone, you need to be able to examine the areas to use your team more. Again, I have the mini series, the tryout, that helps you do so. There's also leaning on suspensions in alternate settings. We need to add some skill development so that we are, again, working on the behaviors that we actually want to see. So, all of these actually encompass routine, collaboration, and social emotional development. And this is what I help you and your support staff develop through the framework that I call the social emotionally focused team. I've helped decrease in-school suspensions and out-of-school suspensions by at least 50% in both public and charter school settings. And I want to support your school next. So if you know that your student support team needs transformation, yet you're racing the clock with that honeymoon phase at the beginning of the school year, then you can schedule a free student support call to discuss coaching and PD, or you could DM me. Like I said, I'll send you the link for that. But like I said, if you're wanting to start on some of those signs that we talked about earlier, like creating your behavior response or examining the areas where your team can support you more, like I said, I really suggest checking out the tryout, a mini series on YouTube. So that means you can watch that while you're driving on your way to work in the morning as you're getting ready. And it's about like an hour's worth of time broken into three sections. So I really had a lot of fun time recording that and editing it because, again, I feel like it's an area that we don't tap on much. But if you knew it, then you wouldn't feel like you were doing all of this by yourself. Okay. So, like I said, I hope you join me next Wednesday for the next live. I'll make sure to post that in LinkedIn. Again, if you have additional questions or comments, feel free to drop them down in the comments below. I love seeing y'all's feedback. But like I said, until then, I will see you guys next Wednesday.